Welcome to the Rethink and Return podcast. My name is Jason Shepard. Every week, we rethink things and return to God's original intention and His design. We generally do 2 recordings a week. One, we revisit a passage of Scripture that thousands of people are studying together in a Sunday gathering or in a house church, and we're just going to dig more deeply into these things that we didn't get to talk about enough or want to talk about more that we're wrestling with. And then we do another recording where we're just working out leadership things, being a pastor and ministry or leading stuff, and wrestling with tensions of how we live like that in our world today. So we'd love for you to like this, subscribe to it, share it with other people. Enjoy the podcast. We'll see you soon. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Rethink and Return podcast. I'm Jason Shepard, and I'm excited to have a conversation. Every week, we do 2 of these podcasts. One, we review. We had a sermon that a lot of people are talking about from a Sunday and talking about in their house churches. So we're digging more deeply into a passage of Scripture. But the other time in the week, we're just having a really raw, honest conversation. Mainly, our idea is like a young pastor who is pastoring, who's maybe wrestling with some stuff, thinking about it. That's just the center of this, or a lot of people outside of that center who may enjoy listening to this, or maybe nobody will, but we're going to have the conversation anyway, just about things I talk about with other pastors. And so today, one of my good buddies, Billy Shield, is hanging out. Thanks, Billy, for coming.
Yeah, bro. Thanks for having me here. Excited to be with you.
We've been friends a long time, Billy and I have. Yeah, and Billy and I also get to pastor church projects together. Billy pastors a church project in another location, and here I am in the Woodlands. And so, this past week we drove to Austin to meet with a group of people who were talking about church planning. And on the way, me and you and one other pastor, we just had a really good, long conversation about the sanctification that is leadership.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great conversation, and it's one I have with people a lot, but that's why I really wanted to talk about today for our first conversation like this, just about how sanctifying leadership is, right? And by sanctifying, I mean, man, God uses it to work out the flesh in me and the humanity in me, and whatever He uses in sanctification to conform us to look more like Jesus, He's done that in pastoring with me and leadership with me in a big way. I think you think the same thing too, right?
Yeah, I mean, leadership, bro, in general is difficult and sanctifying.
That's right.
And then you throw in like leading other people who are trying to follow Jesus, and you're doing it from a public perspective.
That's right.
Like, bro, that is crazy hard. And I think it's like sanctification on steroids, if you will.
Yeah.
And I know I've experienced some of that, not nearly as much as you have. I mean, you've been in this space 15 years here. Before that, I mean, how have you kind of seen that space and God redeem that for your sanctification as you've journeyed with the Lord in leadership?
Yeah. Well, I think we're all growing in that, right? So we're all learning here, like, what is this about? One of the things that's a great question. One of the things that I think I came to accept at some point, or maybe I realized, oh, wow, I'm not just helping other people as they're growing, like we're all actually growing together, all these circles. And so when I started to realize maybe the whole reason I'm here is because I needed more sanctification than everybody else. I like to say God had to work Jesus out in me. I needed so much sanctification that He made me a husband, a father, and a pastor. So, I started to realize, oh, man, God is actually using this to sanctify me more than He would have. I needed it so much, He put me in this role to do that, you know? I mean, have you found that? I mean, you're leading people, shepherding people, sort of overseeing, if you will. In the Bible, we use the word overseer, elder, shepherd, pastor. You're helping shepherd a community of people who are all being conformed into the image of Jesus. Have you seen that this is, pastoring has helped sanctify you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I didn't want to step into pastoring, for a long time was because of the grind of all of that. And you're doing it trying to help other people as well. While you yourself, like, who's pastoring you when you're at the top of that, trying to and hope, thankfully we have structures for that in our local church. But the gift of it, I did not anticipate, how much it was going to be when you're leading at the highest level in an organization for me, and how much God was going to use that in my own journey of leadership and sanctification, and journeying with people like yourself and other people now on our team in Tomball. We get to be open about these struggles. They see them, and then we get to talk about them.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
I mean, a lot of our struggles in the West as followers of Jesus, we could try to hide those, and we could try to push them away.
That's right.
When you're leading,
yeah,
they're going to come out.
Well, I think certain structures of leadership. Man, we've all seen it, and it's been really sad. Like people can hide significant weaknesses in their flesh, and I think one of the things we try to do at Church Project is set up a thing where there's just a lot of accountability, a lot of visibility, but still, if somebody wanted to, they can hide stuff. But I like to say it's very humbling to lead publicly, right? Like it's humbling actually to grow publicly. Like Paul told Timothy, let everyone see your progress.
Right.
And so I've, been leading somewhere over an extended period of time. And so the people who have been here, they've seen me grow. And it's actually, it's a humbling thing when somebody says, I've seen you grow so much. Because although it's an encouragement, it's also an acknowledgement of, wow, you had a long way to go, which, I become more and more aware of how far I've come and how far I have to go. But it is a humbling thing to grow publicly. I mean, have you experienced that? Like growing publicly it's hard, it's humbling.
Growing publicly and in leadership, bro, and then like in those specific gifts that God's called you to lead in.
Yeah.
So, for instance, preaching.
Yeah.
I mean, humbling to put yourself out there every week.
Yeah.
Hoping that that's what God is going to take and use to help shepherd the flock. But man, over time, doing that with the same people is a gift in itself, right?
Yeah.
For sanctification. And I've seen it in that particular area, as well as leading more people to try to help, take the message of, hey, we're discipling a whole church of house churches.
Yeah.
Trying to lead in that way is humbling because we have challenges enough leading ourselves individually.
Right.
Leading our families, leading our homes, and then now we're trying to do that with other people. So the sanctification process, I think, that I've experienced here, even in the last several years, has been accelerated because of God's, call on my life to lead.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you think about, all the fruits of the Spirit, just love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness and faithfulness and humility and self-control. All of these things that we need to grow in publicly. So people have seen me grow in my gentleness or my kindness or my self-control or my patience. Well, God has used leadership to do that. And then all the other skills or gifts necessary that if you stay somewhere over a long period of time, people see that. That's why I think it's easier for some people to just be somewhere for a short time and then move because the distance between where I was and where I am now, for people who have seen, I'm still connected to that immaturity or that lack of strength or whatever that, and so it'd just be easier to go and start over at a higher level, and the distance isn't that far. I was speaking with one of our house church pastors this week. Yesterday, I think, we were having coffee. And he said, well, tea for me, coffee for him. You're a coffee guy.
I'm a coffee guy, bro.
I don't drink coffee. I hear it stunts your growth, and I'd like to get to 5'11". So we're having, coffee and chai and whatever. And I said, man, how do you feel about adding this element of pastoring a house church into your life when you're already busy with family, marriage, kids, work? And he said something that I resonate with. And that I agree, like the level of accountability that leading brings into your life. Like I hope that I love Jesus enough that I would obey him in every area of my life, that I'd, be corrected by the Spirit and confess and repent. And I hope that I'd read my Bible every day and pray every day and I'd obey in all these areas if I wasn't a pastor. But being a pastor adds a level of accountability there because I know, well, if I'm hiding sin in my heart's going to get hard. Or if I don't repent, or if I step into this sin, or if I don't keep my heart on fire for the Lord, like the consequences of that are bigger because I am called to shepherd, oversee, pastor, be an elder at a place. So there is this inherent accountability of leading that I'm becoming more and more aware of. I've always been aware of it to some degree, but I'm actually grateful for that. And maybe I needed that, and that's why God made me a pastor, which I think is a flip side, right? Because the arrogance of some pastors to go, I'm so much better than people that I'm a pastor. But for me, I'm like, I needed it so much.
Yeah.
God made me a pastor. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard you say that before, and I've appreciated that, and because I've known you for a long time, and I've known you from a distance, I've known you closer, and I've seen that sanctification process, in different seasons, and so it's for me, it's cool to see it, and experience it, as well as I think receive from it, receive from the sanctification that God's done in your life. Yeah. That in and of itself is another humbling thing. Right. I mean, you're like, people are receiving from something that God is continuing to do. Yeah. And I'm unaware of that, but God is doing a work. And I think that's encouraging, humbling, all those things you talked about. But being in a place where, I mean, you're accountable. Yeah. Like, I want to be a fully integrated person. Sure. Right. We all do. Yeah. That's Jesus's desire for us. Right. And to live in a place where an area of my life is not integrated with what Jesus wants as a leader. Right. Bro, that's stressful. And that's overwhelming, right? Yeah. And so I'm, like you, accountable to God wants me to follow him so close and so radically in my own flesh to go, hey, I have to lean into these areas that are not my natural thing. Like, I don't want to read and study all the time, bro. Right. But God, because I feel compelled and called by God to lead people, I have to submit myself to that. I have to die to those flesh desires, and I have to submit to what God wants. Yeah. That's a sanctifying work in my life. Yeah, sure. Same thing you've experienced. And doing it over time, I think, like you said, is huge in a particular place with a particular people. Yeah. I think growing in gifts, like I need to grow in leadership. Right. I need to grow in how I lead people, how I walk, I mean, from hiring to firing to teaching to, I mean, all the things that we even actually see a lot of the apostles go through. Right. Like, Paul, who are you taking with you in your missionary trip? Who are you not? Who are you elevating to a place of an elder at a church? Who's not ready for that yet? And so all these skills I've had, so all the skills publicly and all the gifts and all the fruits of the Spirit publicly have been a very sanctifying thing. Another thing that's been very sanctifying being a pastor is pain. Like, there's a unique pain to being a pastor. And frankly, I think I get embarrassed sometimes at pastors that whine and complain, and I'm like, stop it. Everybody's job's hard. Right. Like, I know a lot of people who are working as hard or harder than I am. I work very hard, though. Right. Hopefully to a healthy point. We've had good boundaries. We'll talk about that on some podcasts, like healthy boundaries and, rhythms and all that. But I think that a lot of pastors are weak. They're like, it's so hard being a pastor. Everybody's job is hard. With that being said, there is a uniqueness in being a pastor of pain. And I think it's at least in these few areas. Number one, everybody's got pain in their circle. Like, we have people who are diagnosed with diseases this week, or who have lost their jobs this week, or their spouse left them. Everybody has a circle, and there's pain in that circle. I just have a lot of circles. Right. There's a lot of circles. And usually from what I do now, the greatest pain in each of those circles are the things that I deal with or I help other people deal with. So people's pain, and then the pain that people cause you. Like, I was actually telling somebody this week, I could introduce somebody to their spouse, do their wedding, pray over their baby, and then do the funeral of their child who died, like real things I've done, and then somebody will leave you for something that they don't like. Yeah. And that's a real pain that we deal with too, right? So we're dealing with other people's pain, and then we have pain inflicted on us from people leaving us that we've loved, or the criticism because we're more upfront, more visible. So that pain has really, God's used being a pastor to sanctify me through the public accountability and through pain that others have gone through and that I've gone through. How do you resonate with that? Yeah, I resonate with it as well. I mean, the pain piece, a lot of people don't think about that, that God also is working in the midst of that mess of pain, whatever, if it's being, directed strictly at us, or if it's something that we're connected to by proximity and what God's called us to do. I think the pain piece for me is like seeing people who you actually want them to experience a level of love and intimacy with the Lord. And they just, for whatever reason, you can't get them to a place where they want it as much as you do. And the pain of them bouncing out of that for me is so hard because we love people, bro. That's why we're doing this, is to help people walk with the Lord. And the pain of seeing people bounce out of that for me is a big one. Now, I haven't experienced to date a ton of pain by proxy within our church, being 18 months in.
Right.
But we do have the pain of marriages. We do have the pain of relationships that are dissolving over, silly things.
Yeah.
And that pain for me helps. It actually drives me deeper to prayer. I mean, it's the prayer piece in pastoring, and maybe that's a whole nother conversation one day you'll have.
Sure.
But that I have to take that pain and I have to give it to somewhere. I have to carry and care at the same time, like we talk about.
Yeah.
And so the only way I can do that is to be like, this pain is just overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
I've got to go somewhere with it. And I have to take it to Jesus and I have to take it in prayer. But it is humbling to know I can't carry all this.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to be unhealthy. I'm going to be very beat down and burned out,
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the sanctification for me of being a pastor is that, there's a lot of beauty for sure that I've got to be a part of, you've got to be a part of. We just see God working in people's lives, God using a church in a city or in other cities, or people's lives being changed. I love all that. But also the immense amount of pain that I have seen or that I've gone through, it has at times crushed me. And in that crushing, that's where my the real sanctification happens in that breaking. And there have been a few times that I've been so crushed here even that I have I didn't know that I could continue. And those have been the times where God's really, really reformed me, remade me. And I think there may be some, young pastors listening, or maybe even, you're my age, middle-aged pastors. And, I'm 51, and I've been doing this a long time now. I never thought I would do it, and here I am. But, you're in the middle of a lot of pain, and you don't know, how to keep going. I would just say first, pressing into the sanctification that is pastoring, pressing into this moment. That's what I would encourage you to do. God has built me for the next season, generally through those portals of pain, And if I quit being a pastor tomorrow, and God may call me to that, I don't think so, but he may. But if that happened, I would have to now look back at being a pastor, a shepherd, an overseer in a church and say, God used that to grow me the most, And I would have to be thankful for it. Like James 1 says, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith develops, and he lists all the things it develops. For me, I would have to consider being a pastor, even the tough times, as joy now, because, man, God really used that season, that hurt from that person or that painful season or whatever. He used it to really sanctify me and grow me. And so, thankfully, I love Jesus more than I did.
Right.
But I think if you don't look at pastoring and the pain and the accountability, if you don't look at that as part of God's sanctification in your life, people could get bitter.
Right.
They get bitter at God or the church, And, have you ever experienced anything like that?
I've experienced pain on my journey, into pastoring.
Yeah.
I've experienced pain that people weren't intentionally or malicious in it, but it was pain as I had, I think, prescribed my trajectory towards ministry, and God used it, in a profound ways in my life to just really show me, hey, bro, I don't need you.
Yeah.
I've been doing this a long time without you.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep doing it when you're not here.
That's right.
And I do want to, though, work in and through you in this way. And so I think he really had to get me to a place of stripping, like I was somehow needed and necessary for God to do a work in my community.
Totally.
Bro. And that was like so painful and sanctifying. And that season for me, bro, to walk through a season like that, I had to have people outside that I could bounce things off of and talk through, who knew me, who knew and believed in the call that was on my life for this, and who could guide me through that. So in seasons that you've experienced, I mean, what would you say would be some great just ways to navigate that pain for young pastors like we're talking about? How have you done that, and what would be some good ways for them to set themselves up for that?
No, that's good. I think when I think back to the seasons of pain that I've had here, just being here at this church for 15 years, man, all the things, like this week in Galatians, we'll be talking about Paul saying, am I now trying to win the approval of man or God? And so if I look back in my life, like just growing up, and then, pre-college, college, and after for years, just needing people to approve of me, or being really hurt when they didn't, being confused as to why not, or, and I mean, I had to grow in grace of the gospel, but I also had to just go through a lot of times where people didn't approve of me. And I think Paul had a lot of that, And so pressing into that, here's the thing that I think, God just put me on the ground and put his boot on my neck, and he's like, I love you enough that I'm gonna make you sit in this. I'm gonna take you through it. Like, I don't think we can choose pain to sanctify us. It's masochistic.
Right, that's right.
It doesn't make sense to go, I want pain because I want to grow.
Right.
And so I'm going to choose pain. But I think God in his grace at times is he's just said, there's nowhere for you to go. And at times there's nobody for you to rely on. Like Paul one time said, everyone in the province of Asia deserted me. I haven't been that alone, but I have felt pretty alone. And when I look back, God just, sequestering me and putting me on the ground and making me stay until somehow the storm passed, or I was ready to face that storm,
Right.
And so God's been good to force me to stay in it when I would have fled.
Yeah. And
then he has been good to put good counsel, good accountability, good people in my life. But I will say this, I have learned that, I have 4 mentors. I meet with one of them a week every month. And then I have our elders that I meet with collectively and individually. And I have other people that are pouring into me. I have a lot of accountability, a lot of counsel, a lot of goodness around me that I've set up and initiated, and that I submit to even now. But at the same time, a lot of this stuff, I think we realize it's only me and the Lord here. I mean, God's actually, no mentor, elder, friend, advisor, nobody can do the work that only the Spirit of God can do. And so no matter what, at the end of the day, it's still going to be me on my face, on the floor with God, me wrestling with God about this.
I mean, I've had that moment. I was laughing because it was God. He brought something to when I was in a season of pain and rejection in my journey. I said, I'm done. I don't ever want to do this.
Totally.
Lord, dude, I've been trying to do this.
That's right.
And now it's not happening. So done. I'm out. And the people were looking at me who I was telling this to. They were like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with this guy? We know this has been his thing. And the Lord, so gracious. He came after me still, bro, and continued to pursue me for the purposes of sanctification. And to actually allow me to steward what he's put inside of me to help build the church. That, to me, is a radical love and pursuit of God's grace towards just me as one individual who didn't even want to do it.
That's right.
The sanctification process of pain brought me to that place where I'm out. In my own will to even want to try to pursue it. And God, in his kindness, man, I think came after me in another season where I had to walk through some things. And be cared for and be pastored through it,
So the idea here, the theme would be sanctification through leadership. So first, this accountability of I have to grow. It's humbling to grow publicly. People have seen me at not my best. And then the pain of, because of my own humanity, that people have hurt me or criticized me, or sometimes the criticism has been right, sometimes it's been warranted, sometimes it's not. Sometimes people act as if they're, they're not a human being too. So I have often said, I give more grace than I receive. And I used to hate the fact that that was true, but now it's just taught me how much grace I've received. But I do give more grace than I've received, at least by some. But then some people give you so much grace, they stay through all your seasons of sanctification and leadership. So sanctification through leadership by staying and being accountable and being public. And then sanctification through leadership by the pain that comes from leading, Yeah. Any other ways that you've seen, hey, being a pastor, being a leader, it's sanctified me?
I mean, one of the things, bro, like practically, having to think about everything all the time for everyone else. That is a painful process all the time. Because, bro, one day I just want to be like a regular person coming in for a gathering.
Yeah.
And to enjoy it, but I can't.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about everything all the time. And I know you do that as well, and you've taught me a lot about that. But I mean, coming in, it's all the time, always. Does anyone else thinking about the things like I am? And that you have to guard your heart on that, because, bro, your expectation that you can place on people can put you in a place where you become angry, frustrated. You haven't spoken the expectation, or even helped them see, like, hey, I want all of us doing this.
That's right.
And that's been a huge, I think, shaping thing in my leadership, is knowing that, God has called me to help, be accountable for all of these things with the help of other people that I'm called to lead into this, to come alongside. And I think the pain of like feeling the weight of that, if you will, makes your leadership expand and go, I can't carry this all the time.
Right.
I gotta impact somebody else's life with it, empower someone else, equip them to do this with me.
Yeah.
And so that piece of leadership is an amazing, I think the sooner you can learn that about the equipping and empowering other people to share that with you.
Sure.
That is huge for me.
Yeah. Paul said, right, I face daily the pressure, concern for the churches. Right. And sometimes I think he was probably wondering, does anybody else share my concern? Does anybody else feel this pressure? Right. I wish I wasn't alone in feeling that. But I do think, thankfully, after a certain amount of time, it's probably not just time, it's also size or stages or seasons of leadership. Right. But, now I'm at a point where I'm like, there are people who, they get this like I get it. They see it like I see it. But that took years for people to believe in it so much, or understand it so much, or see it so much. Even the cultural things that we wanted to do, it does feel alone, even if you have some people around you, and then those people, rotate. And some of them you're glad they left, some of them you wish they hadn't. But when those people rotate in and out, at some point, the feeling alone in the early seasons of leadership, that is really hard too. Yeah, I think to keep our hearts soft early on, candidly, when Church Project started, I was pretty angry. I was angry at God for calling me to start a church, and nobody came for a couple of years, and really very, very few people came. And I have to look back and realize, wow, one of the things God was sanctifying out of me, he had to get rid of a lot of pride that I didn't even know I had to that degree, because in some ways, I accused God of being a bad steward of my own calling and my own gifts, It's like I accused God of being a bad steward of my own calling and my own gifts. How horrible is that? You're like, God, you could be using me greater. You could be using me better. You set me on a shelf here. I was doing something else, and then you called me here, like, Moses when, he takes people in a desert. Right. And they even were like, why did you bring us here? It was better. And so God had to sanctify through leadership and through really my own bad leadership and a not fun season at a church plant, my own pride. That was really hard. Yeah. And then I was angry at God for not having more people here. I was angry at the people who were coming for not bringing more people. Like, why don't you believe in this enough? And then I was angry at other people who weren't here. Right. Like, you should want this. Right. And so, man, no wonder people didn't come. I'm just an angry dude, And God had to, the early seasons of starting, when you feel alone and you feel like God's not in it and you wonder why, because you thought your heart was pure. Right. That's super sanctifying, man. Yeah.
Yeah, bro. And we've benefited from that because, we have the culture over in Tomball because you've been doing it for a long time.
Which, for context, is a church plant that came from out of our church in the Woodlands over there.
Right.
For those who may not know that.
Right. We have that culture. So, but I still find myself, with people coming in where I'm tempted to be frustrated in that way because of that leadership that's on me. I feel the stress of that and the pressure of that, right? And I know that God's called me to do it, but I want to share it. And so how has that translated from you leading here in organizational ways? How has that translated into your sanctification and leadership, maybe in your home or in other places that God's called you to lead? How is that being a pastor publicly?
Yeah.
Because I know for me, bro.
Yeah, sure.
It has, the grace that you talked about, like for your family and for your spouse and for your kids. They see you all the time.
Right.
And so they have to see you fully integrated as a leader, as a follower of Jesus, as a dad, as a husband. That to me, like second to being in public, also being a pastor in your family, that sanctification process for me, it brings out all the frustration, all the anger, all the pride, all the things that God's wanting to pull out. But it has transformed the way that I see, have led in my home, and the way that I see, my children, in response to the leadership that God's given me, both as pastor and husband and father, and those things. So, I think those things have the overlap that's unique, right?
Yeah.
It's unique for us organizationally here as pastor, and then
I think so
in a different way,
Yeah, maybe then a different role. I'm not sure. I think everybody is a follower of Jesus. He's using job everywhere to sanctify them. But this, I think, in unique ways. And so, when I'm angry at God and the people who are coming, the people who aren't coming, the people who are working with me who don't get it enough or care enough, like when I go home, I'm probably still pretty and not a fun guy to be around. And so, thankfully, when God, breaks and remakes you, it affects the way you are everywhere. We want to become fully integrated people, but even if we don't want to be integrated, these things touch and overlap. And so, it's very good to be able to go home and not be angry at God, self, others, staff. It's very good to be able to go home and just really know, okay, God's working here, and he's going to keep working. I can't force this. I can't make this. I can't. Am I a better pastor? I think so. I hope so. People who have been here would say that. Am I a better preacher? Sure. Leader? Sure. Hopefully all these things. But also, am I a better husband? I think so. My wife would say so. Am I a better father? I think so. My kids would generally say so. And so, am I a better friend? I think, gratefully, God, he's not sanctifying us for a position.
Right.
He's sanctifying the person.
Right. Yeah, and, so good.
And he's used the position to sanctify the person.
Right.
And I think that's the theme as we wrap up here. I think, sanctification through leadership, God's remaking us while he's using us as he works in other people. And I think if we separate ourselves from, this is a community of people who are being sanctified, who are being conformed into the image of Jesus, God's remaking this whole community of people here. If we think we're here for them, for God to use us to do that in their life, but to not think that he's doing the same thing in us, maybe even more so, I think that's where we get foolish. So sanctification through leadership. Anything else, Billy, you want to add or ask, or any final thought here?
No, I think what I would add is just that, for these young pastors, maybe they're thinking about going into ministry or whatever it is, and they're thinking most of the time, like I thought, I want to preach, or I want to have a microphone, right?
That's right.
And I was listening, I think years ago, I was reading something, and I believe it was Louis Giglio said, if you want to, young speakers, preachers, if you want to have the microphone, make sure you have something to say. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that was powerful. Because most of us in our youth, we just want to be on the platform and be affirmed or be whatever and have, that space. And I think that particular thing for young pastors, the sanctification of your leadership, not only just like in your preaching and preparation, all those things we have to do to lead, but the sanctification will affect every area of your ministry.
Absolutely.
That particular piece of leadership affects every single area that you're called to lead in the church. And for me, it was I had to be around other people who were actually demonstrating it, where I could see it, and then I could ask about it. And so I would say, don't try to do any of this stuff alone. If you're a young pastor, get around some brothers that you either respect, or know you real well, get in a network, whatever it is, close to you that are gospel preaching churches, and get them to speak into your life regarding your leadership.
Yeah, I think, I think people come into this with a passion, a sense of a calling, and certain gifts that they've cultivated. But if God's going to use you, he's going to break you.
Yep.
He's going to break you and continue to remake you and reform you into the image of Jesus. And he is not going to give you gifts to use on a stage and to use you in people's lives without first maybe crushing you. And so that's the sanctification through leadership that I've endured. Yep. People that I walk alongside with are willing to endure, and they have endured. And if you're going to keep leading, God will keep using leadership in your life to sanctify you. So I would tell you, submit to it, be aware of it, acknowledge what God's doing, and let him grow you. As you're leading, he'll be sanctifying you. Billy, glad to be your friend.
Yeah, bro.
I'm glad to serve Jesus alongside of you. And we've been able to do it for years. Look forward to many more together, God willing. Yep. And hey, thanks for watching this podcast, Rethink and Return podcast. Again, every week. We're going to, on Tuesday, we'll be coming out with a review of a sermon. We just dig deeply into that, a casual conversation, but some stuff we wish we could say on a Sunday we don't have time to. And then on Fridays, we're coming out with a conversation like this, really pastoring, leading, things like that. Here's the only thing we ask of you. Will you just like it, share it with people? That'll help us let other people know about it. That'll be great. Have a great week. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for spending time with us today on the Rethink and Return podcast. Here's all we ask from you. Will you subscribe to this, share this, let other people know about it? That'll help us get the message out. Share this content with other people if it's helpful to you. We're grateful for you. See you soon.